Game starts in New York City. We see a man running away from police. He jumps on a train that enters the tunnel. As he jumps through the window, it turns out the train is filled with terrorists and we can see that he is wearing handcuffs. He goes through the train eliminating terrorists until he spots one, placing C4 on the door. He tries to get to him through the window, but he gets shot and almost falls down. When he gets back on the train roof, another explosion takes place and that opens a hole back into the train. Soon, the man gets ambushed by the same guy. Next thing we see Sergeant Blackburn being interrogated about the terrorist attack planned in New York for today. Blackburn recognizes a guy named Solomon in the picture and says he is the one who is planning the attack. But actually, it turns out that the agents suspect him of somehow being involved in the hostile terrorist operation planned by Solomon. Blackburn confesses he met Solomon 9 months ago during the Operation Soulbreaker in Kurdistan. His mission was to search for the missing Viper squad investigating an improvised explosive device in Iraqi Kurdistan. Viper's last known position was in territory controlled by the People's Liberation and Resistance, an Iranian paramilitary group, and soon they get ambushed by PLR. They push back the enemy, and while looking for the Viper squad, Blackburn is sent to secure an IED site, but he gets sneaked from behind by one of the terrorists and struggles to push him off. He manages to beat him and cuts the wire right before the explosive set by terrorists exploded. Back on the streets, Blackburn's squad fights to clear the landing zone for extraction, but during the battle, there is an earthquake and one of the buildings collapses, falling down on the chopper, knocking down Blackburn for a few hours. When he wakes up, he is injured and he sees Solomon taking the another injured Marine and then ordering one of his men to take him away. A few hours later, Blackburn manages to get out of the ruins. He sneaks through the streets as PLR patrols are searching for American soldiers everywhere. On the way to the extraction point, he meets Montez and together they get on a plane and leave the place. Turns out PLR used the chaos caused by an earthquake to overthrow the Iraqi government. In reaction, the US sent 50,000 soldiers to Kurdistan, and that triggered a war in the whole region. Then Blackburn is asked about al-Bashir and Lieutenant Colby Hawkins. He says he doesn't know her. Then we see Jennifer Colby Hawkins being informed about change of plans and receiving an immediate launch orders. She learns that it's going to be a strike mission over Tehran to take down al-Bashir. Jennifer gets on her F-18. Very soon her squadron is attacked by enemy fighters and the other plane got shot down. But Jennifer manages to shoot down enemy fighters and helps in taking over the base. But turns out, al-Bashir wasn't there. Agents are very suspicious and Blackburn is asked about his knowledge of al-Bashir connection with Solomon. And things get a little bit tense when one of the agents starts pushing Blackburn and blaming him for the death of his commanding officer. Then they ask him about the nuke he found in Tehran. Well, his team was sent to capture enemy structures strategic for the intelligence. They storm the apartment complex, then they use the Humvee to move to the financial district. They get ambushed by an enemy on the highway, but they received a warning earlier, so they are prepared to push them back. Then Blackburn proceeds to the bank building, and while the rest is fighting to take over the place, Blackburn sneaks through the fire stairs and enters through the window, surprising terrorists inside. When the building is secured, officers are ordered to look for al-Bashir. They go for the underground vault, and it turns out it's very well protected. They manage to get inside, and it's filled with money and documents about current PLR operations. Soldiers also find a Russian portable nuke, but the bad news is the case used to contain 3 of those, and there's only 1 inside. Suddenly, al-Bashir pops up on the monitor. Turns out, he and his men are heading into the vault, so soldiers decide to secure the nuke and escape as soon as possible, and the building looks like it's gonna collapse very soon. Back in the interrogation, agent asks about the other nukes and Blackburn says one is already here in New York. Agents ask about Paris and Blackburn gets stressed. They show him pictures of Dmitry Mayakovsky, aka Dima, assuming Blackburn knows him and he knows why he was in Paris. Blackburn wants to know what happened in Paris, but agents tell him only Mayakovsky knows what really happened there. Then we see Dima in car with two other Russians, and one of them says he hopes the American will do what he has to do in New York. Looks like their objective is to capture the nuke before it detonates, even if that means killing police officers. Soon they activate a jammer to prevent Solomon from detonating the nuke from the distance. Then they storm the building filled with terrorists, and through the parking lot they progress upstairs to the offices and enter a main room getting close to their target. But the terrorists start to escape with the nuke. They run outside and escape through the streets, where they have to fight the French police, who don't differentiate them from the terrorists and just shoots everybody. And that chase turns into a regular battle in the middle of the city. A helicopter gets shot down, crashing on the building, and one of the terrorists uses an RPG, and that actually kills one of Dima's friends. The guy with the nuke escapes to the train station, and there he jumps on Dima at the entrance to the platform. Dima manages to handle him and throws his ass under the train, but turns out the bag he left contains a dummy, not a real nuke. And a few seconds later, we hear an explosion, and a blinding lightning comes after very soon. The nuke was detonated in the other part of the city. Agents show Blackburn what happened in Paris, informing him there were 80,000 casualties. Blackburn explains he tries to stop Solomon from doing the same in New York. Agent points out that a Russian ex-Spetsnaz being in Paris at the same time that the nuke was blasted makes it kinda look like Russians did it, and Dima was sent by them to detonate the nuke. Blackburn tries to explain that Dima was there to stop it. Then agents mention Miller, and Blackburn says that back in Kurdistan they sent a distress code and Miller came to get them. We see Sergeant Miller on a tank advancing through the highway, fighting enemy forces on the way to Tehran. They push forward through the streets to get to Blackburn, who is waiting for backup in the bank building. Unfortunately, Miller unit gets hit by a missile and gets stuck. While they try to hold on waiting for air support, they got caught from behind by PLR. Miller gets captured and he wakes up in a room with Solomon and al-Bashir, and they record a video with Miller's execution. Agents show the video to Blackburn saying it doesn't connect Solomon with nukes. And again, he tries to explain, no, that's exactly what it does. But since the bank building was destroyed and Miller got killed, there's no real evidence or anyone who could confirm his version. At the same time, they receive a call confirming that one of Solomon's known fake ID aliases was registered arriving in New York. And all of a sudden, Blackburn's version is starting to make more sense. Then he tells the story when he was sent to take down al-Bashir. He was a part of an assault team on a stealth mission during the night. They sneaked through the buildings and found a room where Miller was executed. Then they went to the location where they believed al-Bashir is right now. And when they got close, they saw al-Bashir trying to escape with a car, but they shoot the car and make him crash the vehicle. So they grab him and take him out of the street, calling for backup and waiting for evacuation. And turns out Bashir got badly injured due to the accident. Blackburn manages to take him to a safe location at the mall and takes a defensive position until they got evacuated. Al-Bashir's condition is getting worse and he gets delusional, saying different things in agony. He speaks how Solomon must have betrayed him and betrayed his location, and that he also was the one who stole the bombs. And he reveals and warns Blackburn that on the 4th day of this month he plans to strike, and then he passes away. Agents show Blackburn's Bashir's phone containing information about a Russian arms dealer Kafarov connected to al-Bashir. After al-Bashir's death, he was believed to be the one who had stolen the nukes. Blackburn tells how they tried to capture Kafarov in his villa on the Caspian Sea coast near the Azerbaijani border. However, they run into a Russian paratrooper battalion also after Kafarov, and they were forced to fight them. In the chaos of the battle, Blackburn's squad mates Campo and Matkovich are killed by Russian air attack, and actually one of the agents showed compassion for Blackburn's loss, but soon he turns it over into anger again, accusing him of turning on his bodies for the enemy. Blackburn tries to explain the Russians were not the enemies in this one, and the other agent points out to Blackburn that Dima was also in Iran with a similar mission targeting Kafarov's villa. Actually, they succeeded in raiding Kafarov's place. They take down Kafarov's security and chase him while he tries to fly away with a chopper. Dima jumps on it on the last second and he starts to fight with Kafarov. During that fight they both fall down, but luckily for them they land in a pool. Kafarov tries to bribe the team, but he gets bitten by Dima. Dealer swears that he doesn't have the nukes and he will reveal everything if they let him go. When Blackburn arrives at the villa with his team, they split up to search the place. Soon he finds Dima with a deceased Kafarov. Dima takes him at the gunpoint, saying that Kafarov stole the nukes from Russians and sold them to Solomon. He used PLR to get them and plans to attack on Paris and New York. Dima explains that the two of them can prevail the war between their nations. Then he hears an American commanding officer is coming and he gives up and asks Blackburn to kill him to prevent the war that would cause millions of people death. And Blackburn decides to shoot his CO down. And by confessing that, Blackburn actually admitted he shot an American soldier under the influence of a Russian special agent. That doesn't sound good. He is told he was played by Dima and Russians, who were secretly behind the whole operation, just using him as a puppet. But Blackburn still insists on his version of the story though. But since there is no real evidence of the third nuke's existence, and anyone who could back up his version is dead, they still consider him as a traitor. Well, there's Montes, who also was there, but he only saw Blackburn killing the CO, and he has to confirm that, because that's what he saw. And this confession actually proves a version where Dima fooled Blackburn and escaped to Paris to blast the nuke there. One of the agents tells him that Solomon actually works for the US government, and for years he has been cooperating and was put close to al-Bashir on purpose. So that's why no one believes Blackburn. As the interrogators leave the room, they receive a call about a hijacked train in New York. Blackburn realizes he must act. Looking at the train map, he also spots that the train Solomon will use for attack will pass a nearby bridge very soon. He convinces Montes to help him. When agents get back to the room, they attack them and manage to cut loose. They jump out of the building and run on a bridge, jumping on the train roof. And that gets us back to the scene from the beginning of the story. So, fast forward to the moment he got knocked by Solomon. Well, he actually manages to strike back and grabs the other terrorist with the detonator and causes the explosion that crushes the train. Blackburn chases Solomon through the sewers and back on the street. Meanwhile, Montes picks him up with a car and they pursue Solomon until both their cars crush each other. Well, everyone is a little injured, but Solomon stands up and kills Montes. He also tries to shoot Blackburn, but he has no bullets left. Blackburn uses the moment of destruction to hit him and handcuffed their hands together. They struggle until Blackburn spots a brick and uses it to knock down Solomon. Then he secures the nuke. After that we see Dima drinking alone. He is affected with the radiation and writes down his version of the story that actually backups what Blackburn was saying and clears his name. He also justifies their actions in the name of a greater cause. But when he finishes, he takes a gun and at the same time he hears knocking on the door. Fade out and we don't really know what happened. Game starts underwater with Pac whining that he doesn't want to die listening to Total Eclipse of the Heart by Bonnie Tyler. Turns out he's stuck in a car with Irish Don and Wrecker. Don is injured, so he sacrifices himself that the rest could get out. Then we see what happened earlier. They are in Baku. Wrecker is running away from enemy soldiers. When he meets others in the safe house, it turns out those soldiers are actually Russian spec ops. Soon Irish shows up with enemies chasing him, so the rest covers him from the windows. Then they try to reach the extraction point, but the place is filled with enemies. When they get on the roof, they are attacked by a chopper. They almost make it to the extraction, but the ride gets hit and crashes. Whole building starts collapsing and they fall down. Irish helps Wrecker to get back on his feet. Dan gets stuck and he is injured. Irish managed to steal a civilian car while Wrecker had to cut Dan's leg to actually get him out. Enemy chopper is back, so they quickly get into the car and try to escape. While they try to reach the secondary extraction point, they get hit by a missile and crash into the ocean. While they try to get out of the water, we hear a conversation between Oracle and Garrison, who informs that Tombstone, which is the name of the team we just met, retrieved the intel confirming that in the event of a war between China and USA, Russia will be loyal to Admiral Chang. And the situation in China doesn't look good as people are rioting on the streets and Russians are already getting involved there. Oracle responded that they need to lock down Suez Canal. In Shanghai, Garrison explains that people are mad about the assassination of Jin Jie, who was a pro-democratic candidate for a new president. Admiral Chang convinced people that USA was behind Jie's death and that caused the riots all over the country. Soldiers are informed that if their operation blows up, Chang will have a reason to trigger a war. Team is sent to ZU Towers to secure some VIPs. Extraction is coordinated by Laszlo Kovic, who is a special agent working undercover. Wrecker is the new leader now since Dan is dead. On the way to the building, they are attacked by an angry crowd and they have to leave the van. They sneak into the hotel but get spotted while trying to get to the VIPs and a shootout breaks out. That blows their cover, but they manage to find Kovic and the two VIPs, a woman named Hannah and her husband. The man is seriously injured and his face is covered in bandage. They decide to go on the roof and fly away with a stolen chopper. While they try to get on board, Hannah's husband gets shot and turns out there are many enemies approaching them right now. Wrecker and the others cover the helicopter with Kovic and VIPs, but they need to find another way to escape from this place. Garrison gives them 30 minutes to get to the ship, otherwise they're leaving without them. So they go through the Shanghai streets filled with soldiers and rioting mob. Turns out the soldiers are shooting civilians now and the place is out of control. On the way they meet two civilians hiding from Chang's forces in one of the buildings. They say Chang's tanks are blocking every exit from the city. Team manages to destroy a tank patrolling the park and gains access to the river. They get on civilian boats and are on their way out while the EMP blast blocks out everything. Irish decides they need to help all the civilians to get to USS Valkyrie. With the help from the US military, a few hundred Chinese civilians are saved. On board, an injured VIP needs to get a CT scan, but most of the medical equipment is down after the EMP blast, so they need to reach USS Titan and use their facilities. Wrecker and Irish are on the way to meet Garrison while the red alert is activated. Turns out Titan was destroyed. Garrison sends Tombstone unit on the sinking Titan to search for intel and survivors and makes Kovic their new leader. On USS Titan, they look for the damage control center. They don't have much time since the ship is sinking. Irish argues with Kovic as they found survivors, but he says to ignore them as they don't have gear to get them out and focus on reaching the data before it's too late. At one point, Irish even hits Kovic with his gun, but he can't do much more. And the lattice won't open. The trapped sailor tells Kovic he was locked here on purpose, but he doesn't know who did it. Wrecker finds the data and Kovic takes it, but it turns out there are enemies on the ship, so Tombstone needs to fight their way out. Soon enemy air forces shows up and attacks US ships. The whole thing turns into a regular battle and Tombstone gets on their boat and fight the enemy patrol boats trying to get back to Valkyrie. Turns out Valkyrie is already being invaded by Chinese soldiers. They push to get to the bridge since Garrison is not responding on the radio. When they get there, they see Hannah being attacked by Chinese soldiers. Turns out she actually handles them really good. She tells Kovic that Garrison ordered to relocate her husband. Kovic gets angry and she tells him Garrison didn't know who she was and she couldn't stop him without blowing her cover. Then they try to fight their way to the bridge, but Kovic gets injured by a helicopter missile. Wrecker and the rest manage to defend the USS Valkyrie, but Kovic's condition is very bad. In his last words, he asks others to make sure that Hannah's husband lives and to tell Garrison to trust Hannah. Then they take back the bridge from the enemies and rescue Garrison. He tells them it's gonna be a long way home, through hostile waters, and the ship is seriously damaged. Intel from Titan confirms that Pacific Central Command was wiped out by Chinese missile attack. Chang gained control over the sea territory. He orders Tombstone to assault the airfield and light a flare for the Air Force to strike on it. Irish is not too keen on Hannah going with them, but I guess no one cares about his opinion. They use the storm cover to strike on the airfield from the sea. Wrecker does a smooth job on driving a motorboat, but US forces are soon spotted by enemies who fire at them. Wrecker manages to make it to the beach, and there's a real battle going on there. They manage to secure the beach and push forward through the streets of Shanghai. Soon they find an abandoned tank and use it to get close to the airfield. Then they use a neighboring building to get to the bridge. At this point, they are the only ones who made it so far from the units deployed by Garrison. Irish and Hannah have another argument, but turns out Puck just graduated a correspondence leadership course and gives them a touching speech that ends the beef, for a while at least. They go through the bridge attacked by Chang's soldiers and storm waves, and one of them gets Wrecker stuck under a car, and while the rest tries to help him, a huge ship smashes the bridge and everyone fall into the water. Luckily they're all alright, and they take an underground passage that leads straight to the airfield. They reach the target area and Puck fires a flare. Now they got 30 seconds to get out before the drop. They find a jeep, Hannah takes the wheel while Wrecker sits behind a machine gun. Before they are able to escape, the bombs start dropping and one of them hits the car. When Wrecker wakes up, he sees Irish trying to resuscitate Puck, but Puck doesn't respond. And soon, Hannah shows with a group of Chang soldiers, and looks like Irish Trust's instincts were right on the spot. We are informed 22 Marines were killed in an assault, but thanks to Tombstone actions, at least the ship made it safely through the Chang-controlled waters. Garrison considered the team missing in action, and we see Wrecker being interrogated and tortured by a guy named Bohai. Chang is also there, and an angry Irish slips something about a guy in the bandages, thinking that he is on Chang's side, but when Chang hears about him, he says they have no idea who they brought out of Shanghai. Wrecker passes out while he is electroshocked by Bohai, and he wakes up hearing Dima's voice, asking, does he know something about J&J? Then he gives Wrecker a sharp object. He says he trusts him, and he will help him get out of custody. Then he takes a pipe and pops a hole in the wall with it. And just for the record, Dima is a guy who appeared in the Battlefield 3, and if you want to see what happened there, just check out my other video. And so far, I tried really hard not to break the narrative character in this one, as the game tone is rather serious. And I've come so far, but in the end, well, I think they went just a little too far. I mean, I know that Chinese products are not always the durable ones, but a wall that you can break by 5 hits with a metal pipe? I mean, why waste time and money to build it? They could just put a few sticks in the ground, rub them with the yellow do not cross tape, and the result would be pretty much the same. Anyway, Wrecker follows Dima. They sneak on a few guards and reach the tower with a control room that can open every cell in the facility. Once there, they open the cells and a riot starts. Wrecker and Dima find Irish. He is obsessed about looking for Pac, and he starts running through the jail, yelling he won't leave without him. So I guess he must have somehow resurrected, because last time I checked, Pac was dead like it was 1996. When they reach the elevator, Irish realizes Pac is dead, and Dima asks Wrecker, is everything okay with your friend? But actually, to list everything that is wrong with Irish would take longer than an elevator ride, so Wrecker decides to take a rain check on answering. The trio reaches another control room and Dima tries to open the gate while Wrecker and Irish cover him. Dima makes it and they are about to leave the building. But Bohai shows up and knocks down Wrecker. When Wrecker wakes up, he sees Hannah holding Irish at a gunpoint. But what's that? She shuts the guards and frees Wrecker, and the rest explaining, well, it is what it is, but she only wants to protect J&J. So, Wrecker, Hannah, Dima and Irish open the gate and turns out they are in Kunlun Mountains. But they manage to get on a tram and Hannah gets a little more time to deliver an explanation. As you probably already figured, the husband thing was just a CIA cover and Jin-jae is actually on Valkyrie. So it's like super important to protect him from Chang. The tram gets stuck and enemy chopper attacks and shoots the cable, so the cabin falls down from the mountain and turns out it's the end of the road for the good old Dima. The rest is okay, but they are in the middle of nowhere, walking on the freezing cold until they reach road and somehow get a car. Hannah tells Irish that Chang killed all her relatives and burned down her village. And that actually reaches to his heart and he apologizes for the earlier trust issues. They reach the Marine undercover hideout, but there are Russian troops all over the place. They meet Molina, who is running an undercover operation here. He tells them to get to the old town. It's a long walk under enemy fire, but they reach Major Greenland. She tells them that if they help her to destroy a nearby dam, she will give them a ride. So they go to the dam and place the explosives. Next thing you know, the thing collapses down and everyone falls into the water again. But as usually, they are okay after falling from a huge ass altitude and they get out of the water right on time to be picked up by Major Greenland's chopper. Turns out Greenland sends them to the Suez Canal. The Chinese have taken the northern part of the canal and the US forces try to take it back. But if Valkyrie gets there before they do, they will swim straight into Chang's hands. Tombstone team is already on the plane and they see Valkyrie. They are dropped near it and must quickly get on board as the ship is already being taken over by Chang's soldiers. They fight their way through the ship looking for Jin-jae, and at one point they are surprised by... Pack? I have no idea how he made it alive and back on the ship. And he even tries to share that story, but Hannah interrupts him asking about Jin-jae. So I guess we never know, it just happened. Buck takes them to the medbay and they meet Jin-jae and Garrison there. Enemies are coming and Jin-jae is pulling some serious Dalai Lama shit, refusing to take the gun as he believes that when Chinese soldiers see him, they will put down the weapons. He tries to convince Garrison to let him just tack to them instead of fighting. He takes off the bandage from his head and tells Garrison to let those soldiers inside. Wrecker opens the door and... yeah! Actually, Jin-jae's plan worked, and when soldiers see his face, they obey him. Chinese squad leader informs everyone on the radio that Jin-jae is alive, but he also tells Hannah that Chang is coming with a warship and he plans to sink Valkyrie. The only thing they got left on this ship is a supply of C4, so they decide to load it on a motorboat and go to that Chang's warship. They swim close, plant C4 all over the place, and try to blow it up, but turns out the transmitter doesn't work. That means someone must go there and detonate it manually. Irish and Hannah argue about who should go, and Wrecker decides it will be Hannah. Then he pushes the button, the ship explodes all over the place, and then we see Tombstone, or at least what's left of it, flying on a chopper, and pilot reports one of them is missing in action. In 2028, Eastern Europe is caught in a vast fire known as the Baltic firestorm. Not only the continent faces massive destruction, but also pollution and a global temperature rise in the aftermath that led to a major sea level rise. In 2031, the Earth begins experiencing an increasingly severe extreme climate. Environmental degradation starts forming violent hurricanes. The first Category 6 hurricane, Hurricane Zeta, appears on October 9, 2033. The climate begins to threaten the existence of human civilization. Global shortages of food and fuel take place, and the Second Great Depression starts on January 11, 2034. On May 2035, Germany's government collapses and the European Union is disbanded, leaving the continent in turmoil. Many countries close their borders during the crisis, and as more governments collapse, over 1.2 billion people become displaced with no nation to call home. Those alienated people join together, creating fleets and begin to seek safe harbor. Those people came to be known as the non-patriated, or NOPADs for short. By 2037, the United States and Russia are the only remaining superpowers as humanity begins adapting to the new world. Technological breakthroughs in energy and desert irrigation begin to stabilize, while some coastal cities became livable again due to the hydraulic levees and seawalls. National borders are reopened and society begins to rebuild. But many NOPADs reject calls to rejoin the countries of the old world, having created their own identity unbound with any national loyalty. As a result, NOPADs become a permanent fixture in all areas of global decision-making. Many countries, including the United States, begin discriminating NOPAD groups as illegal smugglers, criminals and pirates. In response, NOPADs begin forming task forces, armed groups of ex-military specialists from around the world to defend themselves when necessary. To overcome the extreme climate, Canada and the United States start Operation Steadfast Refuge. They produce a satellite known as the Shearwater 1, a terraforming satellite capable of controlling weather patterns to repair inhabitable lands that were destroyed by hurricanes. In the year 2040, during the first attempt to remove a hurricane, the Shearwater encouraged an error and accidentally released an EMP over the atmosphere, causing a massive shutdown of global energy supplies. After the blast, a space debris storm takes place in Earth's super atmosphere that causes a Kessler effect, causing over 70% of orbiting satellites to crash into the planet. The planet faces a global blackout. Communication grids are destroyed, air travel is disrupted, supply lines are halted, and the economy goes crazy. Over 100,000 people are claimed to have died as a result of the blackout. In the aftermath, military surveillance has become almost impossible, and the United States and Russia blame each other for causing the blackout. Others believe that NOPADs may have been responsible, possibly desiring to create an anarchy. The two superpowers begin a shadow war to secure vital resources. Attempting to avoid declaring a full-scale war, both sides begin fleeting NOPADs task forces as proxies in their conflicts, promising NOPADs access to their resources in return. Those conflicts continue to escalate in scale, and by 2042, open global war becomes inevitable. The remaining unaligned NOPADs are forced to pick sides. By 2041, the US and Russia begin to launch new spy satellites to replace ones lost during the blackout. But to their surprise, NOPADs hijacked a majority of the satellites. As a result, the United States and Russia start to launch a new type of spy satellites. Those satellites have no network capability. Instead, they will fly over hostile territory and gather information. Then, the regulatory crash, allowing ground forces to manually recover their data drives. The areas these satellites crash became known as hazard zones, while NOPAD forces trying their best to steal data drives. Those data drives with intelligence become valuable goods for trading among the dark market, and military intel becomes a real currency. While most NOPADs simply sell them for money, one of them, named Oz, sees the opportunity to change the world. On September 12, 2041, in Doha, Qatar, journalist Kaivan Bashir is contacted by an anonymous source claiming to be Oz, who is the commander of the largest organized NOPAD task force. Bashir's home is raided by Qatari police shortly after being contacted, escaping the police under the cover of sandstorm. Bashir notices the NOPAD emblem hidden in the multiply LED billboards around the city. Following the trail of the emblems, Bashir reaches the catacombs below the city abandoned soccer stadium and meets the NOPAD specialist Piotr Gustovsky, who shows Bashir an escape route out of the city. Bashir arrives at the safe house of a NOPAD task force in Alang, India on November 1st, 2041 and joins them. Later that evening, the group attacks the ship, breaking yard in Alang. Headed by Navin Rao, the ship escapes the port and the army under the cover of heavy storm, nicknamed the Copperfield by the task force. The Copperfield would proceed to haul supplies between NOPAD's groups in the Indian Sea for the next several months, following remote orders from Oz, but begins transporting refugees in early 2042. One such refugee mission results in a skirmish with the Singaporean Port Authority at Brandy Island in February 2042. The Copperfield is nearly captured before being rescued by a large NOPAD flotilla, which drives the SPA away. By early May 2042, specialists Ji-Soon Park had infiltrated Daesung Electronics in South Korea under the orders of Oz himself. On May 8, he causes an explosion at Daesung headquarters, steals data and reaches the Copperfield. In late June, Oz illegally buys weapons from Russians and takes it to their destination Kourou, French Guiana, to head them off to a local militia there. The exchange is interrupted by an attack of United States soldiers. Some of the members of the task force, including Bechir, Rao and Maria Flagg, escaped on a different ship bound to the Russian-controlled Cheftaya Neft oil facility in Queen Mounland, Antarctica. Shortly after arriving, the NOPADs discovered that Russia has begun refusing to give oil to NOPADs ships who do not swear loyalty to the nation. Oz task force, of course, refuses to swear the loyalty and remains trapped. On August 14, 2042, the MFS-04 Exodus, under the command of Captain Kimball Graves of Oz's NOPAD's fleet, arrives with the rescue mission. Russians at first think it's American ship, so they open fire, but Exodus manages to pick up Oz task force and departs. On October 10th, the Exodus is en route to Sierra Leone, but Oz reroutes it to London, England. There, Captain Graves enters the flooded city alone to meet a contact with information valuable to Oz. American Marine Clayton Pekovsky, a former squadmate of Greaves, interrupts the handoff, killing the contact but being injured in the process. Greaves recovers the contact's briefcase and brings Pekovsky back to the Exodus for medical treatment as prisoner. Oz directs the Exodus to the Mediterranean Sea, where three MV-38 Condors will pick up the briefcase. Pekovsky warns Greaves that Oz will use the information in the briefcase to start another global war, which Graves discards. However, Rao accesses the briefcase contents against Greaves' wishes and discovers that it contains coordinates for the crash site of Shearwater 1, which will fall to Earth in 36 hours. Realizing that Oz intends to sell that information to Russians and force a conflict with the Americans, Greaves decides to turn against Oz and stop his plans, so he sails the Exodus into an approaching Category 5 storm to escape. Condors open fire on the ship, but when it enters the storm, the Condors collide with each other. One of Oz's soldiers locates Greaves' son Omar and takes him hostage to force Greaves to hand over the intel. Becher, having witnessed the kidnapping, follows the soldier and encounters Pekovsky handcuffed. Pekovsky convinces Becher that he wants to help, and Becher uncuffs the Marine who chases after the soldier and Omar. Cornered after attempting to shoot down the remaining Condor with a missile launcher, Greaves is shown his son held at gunpoint. With Omar's life at risk, Greaves hands the briefcase to Oz's soldier, but Oz orders to kill Omar anyway. However, Pekovsky arrives and shoots him, saving Omar, but attracting the attention of the Condor, which fires on Pekovsky and kills him. Hiding Omar behind a shipping container, Greaves recovers the missile launcher and shoots down the Condor. In the aftermath of the attack, Greaves discovers that the soldier had managed to send the coordinates to Oz before dying. Moved by Pekovsky's sacrifice, Greaves directs the Exodus to the crash coordinates in Doha and puts out a call to any listening NOPADs to join him in fight. Since the massive open war is inevitable, NOPADs must choose sides in order to survive. And that's the background of the story in Battlefield 2042. Since the game is strictly multiplayer, it does not provide any storyline, just the battle scenarios that can go both ways depending on players. In 2106, the world has frozen. After 100 years of debate and dissension, the world's governments were forced to face the reality of global warming. The next ice age had arrived. The new ice age began in the year 2106 as temperatures plumbed and a massive ice wall began to move south from the North Pole. By 2131, much of the northern hemisphere had been consumed by the cold, with the ice wall extending as far as Italy. The freezing cold consumed living space and resources in the north, forcing populations in these areas to attempt to migrate south. These mass migrations caused several conflicts to arise and old alliances to crumble across the globe. The European Union fell into civil war between its members and nearly collapsed. The only way to survive the Ice Age was through some degree of cooperation, and 6 major coalitions were formed among the remaining nations. The European Union reorganized itself into a military coalition, while Russia formed a new Russo-Asian military alliance known as the Pan-Asian Coalition. The African nations, controlling a major portion of the remaining unfrozen land on Earth, formed the Union of African States. Despite the existential threat posed by the Ice Age, relations between European Union and PAC were in a poor state sometimes before the war. Both fractions were spying on each other. As the result, the European Union was able to capture Titan and Battlewalker technology from the PAC, and the PAC stolen a prototype Mk-15 Bandit from the European Union and used it to create the US-8 Ocelot. The combined effort of multiplied United States and European arms manufacturers would go on to create the SCAR-11, the standard issue rifle for the European Union in an upcoming war. The Union of African States became an important ally to the European Union, as the Union would supply much of Europe's energy and food through the joint projects. Those included Shuhia Taiba, a large-scale agricultural project located in the northern Egypt, and the Sidi power plant, which would provide more than 14% of the European Union population's energy by the year 2143. European Union troops would subsequently be stationed in northern Africa to assist the African Union in defense of those sites. By early 2138, around 10 billion people on Earth, the world's 6 superpowers, were heavily fortified, ready to fight over the remaining land and resources. The Pan-Asian Coalition sets its sights on conquering Africa and the Mediterranean. Expecting an invasion by PAC into the now agriculture-rich plains of North Africa, the European Union concentrated its resources along the Mediterranean, ready to assist the Union of African States. A diversion by 2 PAC battalions into Egypt seemed to confirm their suspicions, but the attacks were merely decoys, meant to distract the world from the PAC's primary objective for the first part of the war: to destroy the military might of the European Union's premier units still left in Europe. The Cold War began in October 2139, with coordinated PAC invasions from the Persian Gulf to the Baltic Sea. In November, as part of the Operation Canute, 3 battalions led by General Arkady Petrov entered Minsk, a key European Union command center in the northern Europe. The European Union Kriegspanzer 2nd Regiment fiercely defended the city for over 4 months until PAC Elite Central Command Group broke through their southern flank, forcing them to withdraw. The Battle of Minsk featured the first employment of the militarized Titan in combat operation, changing the nature of modern warfare forever. Because of the Titan's unmatched effectiveness as both a transport and assault medium, its destruction became a crucial component of military strategy. At Minsk alone, 6 full-scale Titans were destroyed within the first week of combat. In February 2140, a PAC X and 2nd Command divisions swept through Serbia and trapped the European Union 9th Armored Corps in the heart of Belgrade, with a massive ice wall blocking its retreat. The European Union force, inspired by General Emil Nikolai, staged a tensions resistance. In March, the PAC Northern Command Group arrived through recently annexed Bulgaria. Led by a swift V-shaped formation of T-39 Bogatyr battlewalkers, the PAC forces burst through the European Union eastern flank and forced their surrender. With control of Eastern Europe, the PAC turned its sights to the European Union's Central Command in Berlin. On July 10, 2140, as part of Operation Thunder, 15 squadrons of PAC gunships wrested control of the skies above eastern Germany. The victory allowed PAC Titans to airdrop entire regiments of the Northern Command Group behind the EU Brandenburg's Line. Expeditionary Force quickly capitulated. The path to Berlin was cleared. On August 15, the PAC waged an all-out offensive on the city. After 2 months of intense fighting, Berlin fell. The remaining EU forces retreated to France, where they would make a last stand before evacuating to Africa. By the end of 2140, the PAC occupied much of Europe, but had yet to gain control of the Mediterranean. Northern France represented a key strategic passage, but it was a narrow one, given the wall of ice that had advanced all the way to the 49th parallel. The PAC sped into Lorraine to find a small but resilient EU company holding a section of the Maginot Wall in Verdun. The T-8 Tiger main battle tank more than held its own against the newer Type 32 Nekomata Hoover tank, allowing the European Union to hold the position for almost a month. Despite being significantly outnumbered, the European Union forces at Verdun were able to severely deplete the invading PAC division. This effort was due to a large part of the European Union's ability to infiltrate and destroy PAC Titans before they could distribute troops and supplies to the front lines. Soon, the PAC matched those efforts, inflicting similar damage to their EU Titan counterparts. By 2142, Serber Landing was the last European Union stronghold on the European continent. The port served as the chief's defensive hub for the EU Northern Mediterranean operations. Tasked with seizing the harbor, PAC General Yuri Vladimirovich used commando units equipped with a new IT-33 optical camouflage to infiltrate the city. Once inside there, sabotage the defenses, allowing the general to land his forces in the main harbor. There, they faced the Hell Brigade, the EU premier infantry unit assigned to defend the city. The ensuing violence would establish Serber Landing as the most costly battle of the Cold War. The European Union forces have set their sights on the expanse in the Arabian Peninsula, once known as Highway Tampa. In a desperate attempt to keep their mechanized division operational in the European Union must claim the surviving oil resources and seize the only remaining harbor from the PAC control. Facing the loss of support from their Titan, the remaining PAC forces have taken refuge in Azio City. With the PAC having limited armor and few supplies, the European Union have set an offensive move from an invading Azio bridgehead in the southeast. History books will call Operation Shingle the bloodiest battle in the European Union campaign, causing the greatest suffering and damage to the PAC forces. The attack on Camp Gibraltar was the first deception attack used by PAC to drive EU forces out of position. Although not of military significance, the site was an important standing point for refugees from the Western Mediterranean territories. On April 10, 2142, the PAC AA Command Division attacked the camp. The European Union's 4th and 5th Armored Battalions were tasked with defending Camp Gibraltar. The European Union Command relied on sniper tactics to hold key positions in an attempt to occupy the PAC forces as long as possible. By the end of 2142, freezing temperatures, mass migration and warfare had rendered most of the Pac's occupied territories uninhabitable. Desperate to sustain its dwindling population, the PAC changed its military focus to capturing key energy, food and water supplies. Shuhia Taiba, a large-scale European Union agricultural project located in northern Egypt, was one of the PAC primary targets. On November 11, a fleet of Titans carrying 6 PAC command divisions flew into the skies above. They were immediately greeted by the EU's Second Army. The resulting battle raged for more than a year. Both sides utilized more than 20 Titans between them. By the end of fighting a year later, only 2 remained. Continuous assaults rendered half of the capabilities useless by the first month. Years later, covered in metal carnage, Shuhia Taiba would be referred as the Titan graveyard. In January 2143, the PAC tried to appropriate another key resource target in Egypt, the city power plant. The recently constructed facility provided more than 40% of the European Union's population's energy. With each coalition depleted from manpower and equipment, the battle began primarily as a ground war. The EU 3rd and 4th Infantry Divisions established 3 lines of defenses, fighting off wave after wave of incursions by PAC special forces. In March, armored and airborne divisions arrived for both sides. Within weeks, the fight intensified to become one of the largest and most fervent of the entire war. At the first, PAC utilized its depleted Titan fleet in its attack on the city power station. Soon, however, the ground war intensified. More air support and delivery was required. Within a month, the skies were again filled with Titans. As the PAC launched diversionary strikes from Italy into North Africa, it secretly gathered forces in the Sinai Peninsula to prepare for a full-scale assault on the continent. On May 1st, 4 PAC command divisions flew into Libya to engage the EU 6th Army Group. This left the 5th Corps of the Suez Canal without support when the Southern Command Group, led by General Munokoi, raced into Egypt. European Union forces staved off Munokoi's army until help finally arrived via 10th Airborne Division. Had the PAC seized the Suez Canal, it would have severely compromised the European Union's ability to defend Africa. To attack the European Union's Suez Canal position, the PAC relied on a Titan squadron to transport assets into the field battle. Similarly, the EU employed their own Titan fleet to transfer divisions from the other posts in northern Africa. While conflict raged on the ground, a secondary battle ensued in the skies as both sides attempted to airborne delivery of reinforcements. In an attempt to stop the flow of European Union reinforcements to the Suez Canal, the PAC launched a series of raids against key transportation hubs. The most vital of those targets were Tunis Harbor. Fog in the Strait of Sicily allowed the PAC to land its 8th Command Regiment almost on top of the harbor defenses. This strategy enabled them to pin the EU forces into the harbor with the Mediterranean at their backs. The Valkyrie Brigade formed the backbone of the European Union's defense with their company of L5 racing battle walkers. In 2144, European Union forces established a secret Titan repair and rearmament base on Wake Island with the intent of dividing PAC forces and their supply lines from the east and west of their location. The constructions of the base went undetected until PAC satellites detected military activity in the region and in response sent in their forces to put an end to the European Union occupation and its plans. In the early years of 2145, Earth was freezing rapidly. All the remaining zones of the planet became heated battlegrounds. The most explosive battle of all was focused in the Hawaiian Islands. Known for its lush environments, the islands have now turned mostly to large pieces of rock. It is here on the rock of Molokai that we'll experience the largest engagement in the entire conflict. A few years into the most desperate struggle in the history of mankind, and with the conflict focused around the Mediterranean and Pan-Asian coalition, seized the chance to claim the undefeated natural resources beneath the ice of mainland Europe. By the time of EU is aware of their presence, the enemy is firmly entrenched in the continent's harsh ice fields, among abandoned city ruins. As the European counter-attack progressed through Germany, the Rhine once again became a crucial defensive line. The ice valley created by a frozen river had turned into an almost impassable barrier of broken ice. In the 7th March of 2145, exactly 200 years to the day that 9th US Armed Division crossed Remagen Bridge during the World War II, the European forces launched a bold attack across the ice fields in hope of establishing a foothold in the eastern shores of the Rhine. Port Bavaria was originally part of the network of Titan supply stations spread throughout Europe. As the PAC army advanced in the year 2142, those stations crumbled, one after another, to the PAC forces. In 2145, the port had become the central supply station for PAC Titans patrolling the European continent. As such, it was vital for any counterattack to take control of the station and cripple PAC supply lines. By the late summer of 2145, the EU had managed to push the PAC back through the Western Europe, and now the heartlands of old Eastern Germany and the state of Saxony lay before them. As the Arctic winter, which prohibited any troop movement with its freezing temperatures and harsh weather conditions, drew closer, the Central European High Command ordered their armies to attack the city of Leipzig, the last stronghold of the PAC forces in Europe. Under the cover of darkness, the European Union began to infiltrate the frozen labyrinth of buildings. The European Union forces have pushed east, where PAC forces have gathered to make a defensive stand against the enemy. As the main road into PAC territory, this region is a critical location for both armies. European Union intelligence have reported the location of a PAC Titan manufacturing plant hidden away from the front lines in the region known as Karkland. The European Union forces have a chance to severely impact a PAC war effort by taking control of the region and the Titan factory within. In the year 2147, Earth's natural resources are dwindling. Across the globe, PAC and European forces have been exchanging fire in an attempt to secure those valuable supplies. The most important location of all, the diamond mines. Those are the last known operating mines in the world. Without those diamonds, the ability to operate an armies would be lost. And this is it, this is what we get from the scenario's descriptions, and we don't really know how the game ends. Maybe it will be explained in the future titles. And so far, this is all that happened in Battlefield Modern and Future Warfare storyline, containing Battlefield 2, 3, 4 and Battlefield 2142.